Live from downtown Detroit, home of WDIV and Click on Detroit, Local 4 News at 5 starts now.
Violence in the classroom. A student stabbed inside East Point High School. Police say it was another student who did it.
It's his first day on the job. James White takes over as Detroit's top cop. Tonight, he is talking to Local 4 about his big priorities on day one.
But we're going to begin with major COVID restrictions lifted starting today. What's in, what's out, and what local businesses think it'll do in bringing customers back. Glad you're with us for Local 4 News at 5. Today, June 1st, marks a major change to the rules businesses have been forced to follow now for 14 months.
So here is what is changing. Right now, there are no longer capacity limits on outdoor events. Indoor capacity limits are now set at 50%. The curfew has been lifted for bars and restaurants. 1 month from today, all restrictions will be lifted. Business editor Rob Maloney talked to restaurant owners today.
Okay, so the rules are different now. Expanded capacities. Restaurants can open, they can be open later. And so you'd think that there'd be a lot of people out, a lot of pent-up demand. Well, that's not what we're finding necessarily. Here at the Hopscotch and Bourbon in Roseville, they're closed. Why? COVID hours and limited staffing. Hopscotch and Bourbon opened after the pandemic began, and today the re-themed gastropub sat dark. The chairs remained on the tables. Tomorrow, when they do open under the new rules, it won't be for lunch. Owner Darren Lee needs to.
I was only open enough to where I could staff it for the hours that I was open. And being open on a Monday or Tuesday in the middle of summer with a pandemic going on and everything else just opening back up doesn't make a whole lot of sense for me to open, although I will progress my way to 7 days a week here.
The business model here is what he likes to call standing room only. 10 tables, 30 chairs, allowing most patrons to stand and listen to the music in small groups. His new capacity is going to be 225 people, but he's not anxious to get there just yet.
The tables are still far apart. I'm not bringing any of the extra tables or chairs back right away. I'm going to wait until the business ramps up and we can actually have a need for those tables and chairs.
He believes the end to the 11 p.m. curfew is going to take some getting used to, but customers will do so and soon. Overall, he was able to make it through without PPP money or government loans, and he feels the time is now right to say,
the country needs to go back to work. People need to go back to work. The economy needs to be brought back up to where it's supposed to be.
And so we've talked to a number of restaurant owners today, but the truth of the matter is most of them were short-staffed, didn't have time to talk to us, but they are parroting essentially what you heard Darren say there, that they're looking to ramp things up ever so slowly if they can find the staff. Now, what about bars? Well, behind me here you might recognize the awning. It's Nemo's in downtown Detroit. We're going to hear their story coming up on Local 4 News at 6. Reporting live downtown, Rod Maloney, Local 4.
Just made me hungry for a cheeseburger. Thanks, Rod. Yeah, Karen, too. Let's take a look, though, at where we stand with coronavirus numbers released today. State reporting now 862 cases. That is the entirety for the three-day holiday weekend. So that averages out to 287 cases per day. Point of reference, a month ago, May 1st, there were 3,400 new cases that day. The state is also reporting 13 new deaths.
And with the vaccine, 11 million doses have been sent here to Michigan, with 8.3 million doses going into arms.
Right now, 58.6% of Michigan adults have received at least one vaccine dose.
Now to brand new information. We're learning into a violent altercation involving two students at East Point High School.
One student is in custody, the other's in the hospital after police say a student was stabbed inside a classroom this morning. Larry Spruill live at the victim, just 15 years old, Larry.
That is correct, Devin and Karen. Also, the suspect is also 15. Both of them students here at East Point High School. Now, police say the stabbing happened right here inside the high school, but then the suspect ran out in the middle of the street, and that's where they arrested him. Take a listen. Tuesday morning, East Point High was put on lockdown after police got a call about a student stabbed. East Point police say everything happened around 9:55 Tuesday when two students got into an argument. Out of nowhere, a 15-year-old student pulled out a knife and stabbed the other 15-year-old multiple times in his upper chest area.
You know, I'm really kind of surprised that something like that would happen here.
That's because Pat Novak is a former security guard for 22 years here at East Point High. You can imagine she has witnessed a lot, but she says nothing like this.
No, nothing like that.
Police said the suspect ran after stabbing the victim, but they quickly arrested him outside the school, leaving neighbors in the area wondering what would cause that 15-year-old to take things to that level.
I mean, I'm surprised when it happens anywhere that people go to that level. It's uncalled for no matter what age you are.
Now, police said the victim is recovering in the hospital tonight. As for the suspect, he is at the Macomb County Juvenile Justice Center. They are working with the prosecutor's office to determine charges tonight. We are live in East Point tonight. Larry Sproul, Local 4.
All right, Larry. For the first time in 8 years, there's a new leader at the Detroit Police Department.
Starting today, interim Chief James White is in charge of the department following Chief James Craig's retirement. Sean Lay spoke one-on-one with White today, and Sean, he certainly has some big shoes to fill.
Big shoes to fill, but listen to Chief White. His hands are absolutely full.
Well, first thing I did is met with the staff and just kind of reintroduce myself and say hello to everybody.
No major changes to announce on interim Detroit Police Chief James White's first day on the job. However, like some departments and Chief White's background in counseling and mental health, Detroit Police may be sending mental health professionals with officers on mental health calls. But there's a lot that will have to go into that. Any talk of that, perhaps adding mental health professionals with officers?
I think it's a fantastic idea. I mean, you're not going to have mental health professionals instead of police, but certainly you can have them alongside police, and that's what we're going to look at doing.
Next, the chief says a top priority, he wants his officers to be visible, cruising neighborhoods, talking to neighbors outside of their cars. He says gun violence is a huge issue that he must take on.
We're going to target hot spots, absolutely. We need the community support. We need the community's help. We have to reduce this gun violence, and we're going to do so by targeting those areas that are high in crime.
And don't forget, White isn't the full-time chief yet. He has to compete for this job.
I don't need to be distracted worrying about competing for a job. I need to make sure I'm focused on crime fighting and reducing violent crime, and let the chips fall they may.
Chief White, interim Chief White, hitting the ground running today. Very busy day. It's not over yet. 3 more meetings tonight. Karen Devin, back to you.
So, Sean, when Chief White spoke to you about sending mental health professionals with officers, was there any kind of timeline to that?
Yeah, he says it's going to happen, but it's going to be a long, careful process. Those are some, as you know, Karen, some of the most dangerous calls officers can make, so they need to find the right mental health professionals and training to go along with that to make sure everyone can be there safe. Obviously an important topic to be addressed. All right, thank you, Sean.
President Biden is in Tulsa to commemorate the victims and survivors of the city's 1921 race massacre, one of the most terrible moments in racial violence in U.S. history. The president is meeting with survivors to face the wounds of the past and promote racial equity going forward. Alice Barr is following the president's trip. Alice?
The Tulsa race massacre is rarely taught in schools. Now, on the 100th anniversary, the nation is finally coming to grips with a terrible legacy and the lessons it holds for today. A day of reckoning for one of the most horrifying chapters in American history as the U.S. president for the first time publicly commemorates the 1921 race massacre in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
To all the descendants of those who suffered, to this community, that's why we're here, to shine a light, to make sure America knows the story in full.
100 years ago this week, a white supremacist mob burned down the thriving Greenwood community known as Black Wall Street. Some 300 Black Americans were killed. Thousands lost their homes and businesses. One of the last living survivors recently testified before Congress, seeking justice.
I still see Black men being shot, Black bodies lying in the street. I still smell smoke and see fire.
President Biden meeting today with survivors and their descendants. The massacre, often overlooked in history books, has left an ugly scar on this city.
Black families are half as likely to own a home as a white family.
Amid intense debate over reparations for survivors, President Biden announcing steps to narrow this country's racial wealth gap, carved out through decades of systemic racism. The president's plans include fair housing enhancements, such as addressing inequality in home appraisals and increasing federal contracts with small, disadvantaged businesses. A day to look back, but also forward to heal the wounds of racial injustice in America. Archaeologists have been painstakingly unearthing a mass grave in Tulsa to try to identify those who were killed and learn more about how they died. In Washington, Alice Barr, Local 4.
And Alice, a local congresswoman traveled to Tulsa to be a part of the observances. We will hear from her ahead on Local 4 News tonight at 6.
Much more to come here on a Tuesday. Let's check in with Ben.
Karen and Devin, today starts meteorological summer, and it is going to feel like it, especially when we get beyond the weekend and our one chance of rain and get all kinds of sweaty. We'll look at the increasingly warmer temperatures next.
A man confined to the walls of a building for years now has a new lease on life. Hear this heartwarming story that has a beautiful ending coming up.
But first, a major change from the pandemic could make it just a little bit easier if you end up getting a traffic ticket. We'll have that when we come back.